Robert Sullivan didn't even look up from his laptop when he delivered the words that would change everything. "David, I've reviewed your raise request, and I'm denying it. The reality is, you just don't add enough value to justify the increase." We were in his office, a corner space with windows overlooking downtown Seattle and furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary, and I was standing because he hadn't invited me to sit. 6 years at Cascade Marketing, managing accounts that generated millions in revenue, mentoring junior strategists who'd been promoted past me, working weekends while he golfed with clients, and this was my reward, a rejection delivered with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. My hands clenched at my sides, nails digging into palms, while my throat tightened around words I couldn't safely say. "Robert, I brought in 3 major clients last quarter alone," I managed, keeping my voice steady, even as anger flooded my chest like hot water. "The TechWise account, that was me. The Morrison campaign that won industry awards, I led that strategy from start to finish." He finally looked up, his expression a mix of boredom and mild irritation, like I was a mosquito buzzing around his head during an important meeting. "Anyone could have landed those accounts, David. You were just the person assigned to them. That's not adding value, that's doing your job." He closed his laptop with a definitive click that felt like a door slamming. "If you want more money, add more value. Simple as that." The dismissal was clear, and I walked out of his office feeling smaller than I had in years, the walls of the hallway seeming to close in as I made my way back to my desk. The office felt different after that meeting, the same open workspace with glass-walled conference rooms and expensive Herman Miller chairs, but now it looked like a stage set designed to convince people they mattered when they didn't. My desk was in the middle of the floor, surrounded by co-workers who kept their heads down and their AirPods in, everyone performing productivity while slowly dying inside. I sat there for what must have been 20 minutes just staring at my computer screen without seeing it, Robert's words looping in my mind like a song I couldn't stop hearing. "You don't add enough value." 6 years of my life, poured into building someone else's empire, and apparently it meant nothing. The worst part wasn't even the money, though God knows I needed it. With rent in Seattle eating half my paycheck and student loans taking another quarter, it was the casual certainty with which he'd dismissed my contributions, like they were so obviously worthless that explaining why would be a waste of his time. I left work early that day, telling my supervisor I had a doctor's appointment that had come up suddenly, and walked instead of taking the bus. Seattle in November was grey and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched internal bleakness so perfectly, it almost felt comforting. I walked south along 2nd Avenue, past coffee shops filled with tech workers having animated conversations about disruption and innovation, past boutiques selling $1,000 jackets to people who made in a month what I made in a year. A street musician was playing guitar outside Pike Place Market, his case open for donations, and I stopped to listen for a few minutes. He was good, really good, but his case had maybe $15 in it, and I thought about how talent and value had such a complicated relationship in this world. The musician created something beautiful that made people stop and smile, but they walked away without paying because beauty alone wasn't considered valuable enough to compensate. Maybe that's what Robert meant. I did good work, but good work wasn't enough if it didn't translate into something he could quantify and claim credit for. My apartment in Capitol Hill was a studio I'd lived in for 4 years, 450 square feet that cost $1,600 a month because Seattle's housing market had lost its mind sometime around 2015 and never recovered. The furniture was minimal, a bed that doubled as a couch, a small desk where I worked from home when I needed to, a kitchen barely big enough for one person to stand in. The walls were decorated with framed posters from marketing campaigns I'd worked on, little trophies reminding me that I'd created things people had seen and responded to, even if Robert couldn't see the value in that. I made myself dinner that night, take out Thai food from the place downstairs because cooking felt like too much effort, and sat on my bed eating pad Thai directly from the container while scrolling through job listings on LinkedIn. Every posting wanted 5 to 7 years of experience for salaries, barely above what I was already making. Every company promised competitive compensation and opportunities for growth that would probably turn out to be as empty as Cascades had been. I was 34 years old, and I felt ancient and obsolete, like I'd missed some crucial window where success was possible, and now it was too late to catch up. Sleep didn't come easy that night, and when it finally did around 3 a.m., it was shallow and restless, filled with dreams where I stood in front of Robert's desk, presenting brilliant ideas that he ignored while scrolling through his phone. I woke up at 6:30 to my alarm, feeling more exhausted than when I'd gone to bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering what the point was of getting up and going through the motions again. But rent was due in 12 days, and my bank account had $2,100 in it, after I'd paid this month's student loan installment, which meant I couldn't afford the luxury of existential paralysis. I dragged myself into the shower, let hot water run over me until the tank went cold, and got dressed in the same business casual uniform I wore every day. Dark jeans, button-down shirt, the blazer I'd bought at Nordstrom Rack 3 years ago that was starting to fray at the cuffs. The commute felt longer than usual, every stoplight a personal insult, every crowded bus a reminder that I was just another body being transported to a place I didn't want to be. I arrived at Cascade Marketing at 8:47, grabbed coffee from the kitchen that tasted like burnt regret, and sat at my desk pretending to care about the campaign brief I was supposed to be reviewing. Around 10 a.m., my co-worker Sarah stopped by my desk, leaning against the partition with her coffee mug and a sympathetic expression I immediately distrusted. "Hey, I heard about the raise thing. That's rough. Robert can be such an asshole sometimes." I managed a non-committal shrug, not wanting to get into it, but she continued anyway. "For what it's worth, everyone knows you do great work. Robert just doesn't value the things that actually matter." Her words were meant to comfort, but they just made me feel worse. If everyone knew I did great work except the one person whose opinion determined my salary, what good was that knowledge? The rest of that week passed in a fog of going through the motions, attending meetings where nothing was decided, responding to emails that didn't matter, working on campaigns for clients who'd forget my name the moment their contract ended. I felt invisible in a way I hadn't since high school, like I could disappear entirely, and nobody would notice until they needed something from me. On Thursday, Robert sent a company-wide email announcing that Cascade had won a major industry award for the Morrison campaign, the one I'd led. And in the email he thanked the incredible team without naming anyone specifically, then spent 3 paragraphs talking about the company's vision and values. I read that email sitting at my desk, my coffee going cold in my hand, and something inside me that had been cracking finally shattered completely. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done waiting for recognition that would never come. Done believing that hard work and talent mattered in a system designed to extract value while giving nothing back. That evening, instead of going straight home, I walked to the Seattle Public Library downtown, a beautiful glass and steel building that had always felt like a sanctuary, a place where knowledge was valued for its own sake rather than its profit potential. I wandered through the stacks without purpose at first, just needing to be somewhere that wasn't my apartment or my office, and eventually found myself in the business section. My eyes scanned titles about entrepreneurship, startups, marketing strategies, and then landed on a book with a cover so simple it almost looked out of place. The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. I'd heard of it before, everyone in tech and marketing had, but I'd never actually read it, dismissing it as something for people who wanted to build apps or sell software. But standing there in the quiet library with nothing to lose, I pulled it off the shelf and found a reading chair by the window. The introduction grabbed me immediately. Success is not delivering a feature. Success is learning how to solve the customer's problem. I read that line 3 times, feeling something click into place that I hadn't even known was misaligned. For 6 years at Cascade, I'd been delivering features, campaigns, strategies, presentations, without ever really owning the problem I was solving or the value I was creating. I'd been a cog in Robert's machine, executing his vision or lack thereof, rather than building something that was mine. The book talked about validated learning, about building businesses through rapid experimentation, about creating value that customers actually wanted, rather than what you assumed they needed. By the time the library announced it was closing at 8 p.m., I'd read the first 4 chapters and filled a notebook with ideas that were half-formed but electric with possibility. I checked out the book, walked home through drizzling rain that I barely felt, and spent the rest of the night reading until my eyes burned and my brain felt like it was rewiring itself in real time. By 2 in the morning, I'd finished the book and started sketching out an idea that had been forming in my mind for months, but that I'd dismissed as unrealistic every time it surfaced. Small businesses, restaurants, boutiques, local services were constantly getting screwed by marketing agencies like Cascade that charged them $5,000 to $15,000 a month for services they didn't need and results they couldn't measure. These businesses had tight budgets and real stakes. If their marketing didn't work, they went under. But the agencies treated them like ATMs, locking them into long contracts and delivering generic strategies that ignored their specific challenges. What if there was a different model? What if someone built a marketing platform specifically for small businesses, with transparent pricing, measurable results, and strategies designed for tight budgets rather than corporate excess? I sketched wireframes on notebook paper, mapped out pricing models, calculated what it would cost to build versus what I could charge, and by the time dawn light started filtering through my window, I had the skeleton of something real. I called in sick to work that Friday, the first time I'd done that in over a year, and spent the entire day researching. I looked at competitors in the space, read reviews from small business owners complaining about being overcharged and underserved, studied pricing structures and service models. Every piece of research confirmed what my gut had been telling me. There was a massive gap between what small businesses needed and what marketing agencies provided, and that gap represented opportunity for someone willing to serve that market honestly. By evening, I'd registered a domain name, localboostmarketing.com, and started building a basic website using a template I'd bought for $40. The site was rough, nowhere near as polished as what I could create with Cascade's resources, but it was mine in a way that nothing I'd built in 6 years had been. That distinction felt more important than perfection. The weekend disappeared into a blur of building, learning, and planning. I taught myself basic web development through YouTube tutorials, set up business accounts and payment processing, wrote service descriptions that emphasized transparency and results over industry jargon. By Sunday night, I had a functioning website offering 3 tiers of marketing services specifically designed for small businesses. Basic for $500 a month, growth for $1,200, and premium for $2,500, all prices that included everything with no hidden fees or surprise charges. Each tier was built around what I knew small businesses actually needed: social media management that drove foot traffic, local SEO that made them findable, email marketing that converted browsers into buyers. Nothing fancy, nothing theoretical, just practical strategies that would move the needle for businesses operating on thin margins. I launched the site at 1:45 without fanfare or announcement, just pushed it live and sat staring at the screen, wondering if I'd just wasted a weekend or started something that might actually matter. Monday morning I went back to Cascade Marketing like nothing had changed, sat at my desk with my coffee and my laptop, attended the same useless meetings, and worked on the same uninspiring projects. But everything had changed, at least inside my head. I wasn't David Chen, the undervalued employee, anymore. I was David Chen, who had a backup plan, who was building something Robert couldn't touch or diminish, who had options beyond begging for scraps from someone who'd never see my value. The shift in perspective was subtle but profound. When Robert walked past my desk without acknowledging me, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like I was operating undercover in enemy territory, gathering intelligence while building my exit strategy. During a team meeting where he took credit for my strategy work yet again, I didn't get angry. I took notes on everything he was doing wrong so I could do it right when I had my own clients. The first inquiry came on Wednesday afternoon while I was sitting in a strategy meeting that should have been an email. My phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had filled out the contact form on localboostmarketing.com. I waited until the meeting ended, then rushed to the bathroom to check it properly, my hands actually shaking as I opened the message. It was from a woman named Maria who owned a coffee shop in Ballard and was struggling to compete with the Starbucks that had opened 2 blocks away. I've been quoted $8,000 a month by agencies that promised me results, but couldn't explain how they'd deliver them. Your pricing is actually affordable, and your approach makes sense. "Can we talk?" I responded immediately, scheduled a call for that evening, and spent the rest of the workday barely able to concentrate on anything else. This was real. Someone had found my site, read my offer, and thought it was worth their time. That validation, small as it was, felt more meaningful than any performance review Robert had ever given me. The call with Maria happened at 7 in the evening, after I'd gotten home from work and changed into sweatpants, and tried to calm my nerves with deep breathing that didn't really work. She was in her late 40s, had owned the coffee shop for 12 years, and spoke with the weary frustration of someone who'd been promised solutions by people who didn't deliver. "Every agency I've talked to wants to charge me thousands of dollars for social media posts and Google ads, but nobody can tell me how that translates to more customers walking through my door," she said, her voice carrying the weight of too many disappointing conversations. I asked her about her business, who her customers were, what made her different from Starbucks, what success would actually look like for her, and she answered with the kind of specific detail that told me she knew her business intimately, but had never been asked these questions by the agencies courting her money. By the end of our 30-minute call, she'd signed up for the growth tier, bound $200 a month, my first real client. I stayed up until 2 in the morning that night, building Maria's strategy. Not because I had to, but because I actually cared about whether it would work. I researched her neighborhood, analyzed her competition, identified the specific customers most likely to choose her shop over Starbucks, remote workers who wanted atmosphere over convenience, local residents who valued community over corporate efficiency, students from the nearby college who needed affordable quality. I built her a social media calendar highlighting the things that made her shop special. The local artists whose work she displayed, the book club that met there Tuesday evenings, the owner who knew her regulars' orders by heart. I set up Google My Business optimization so people searching coffee shop near me would actually find her. By the time I crawled into bed, exhausted but energized in a way I hadn't felt in years, I had a complete 90-day plan that I believed would actually move the needle for her business. That belief, that investment in someone else's success, felt revolutionary after 6 years of creating campaigns I didn't care about for clients I'd never meet. Maria's results started showing up within 2 weeks, small at first, but measurable in ways that mattered to someone running on tight margins. Foot traffic increased by 18%. Her Instagram following grew from 300 to 1,100, with actual engagement from local customers rather than bot accounts. 3 people mentioned finding her through Google searches they wouldn't have found her in before. She sent me an email with the subject line, "This is working," and in the body she'd written, "I had my best week in 6 months. I don't know what magic you're doing, but please keep doing it." I read that email sitting at my desk at Cascade during a meeting about brand positioning for a client that would never notice whether we did good work or mediocre work, and I felt the distance between my day job and my real work growing wider with every passing day. Robert was talking about synergy and stakeholder engagement, and all I could think about was Maria's coffee shop and the next small business I could actually help. The second client came through a referral. Maria told the owner of a bookstore 2 blocks away about the results she was seeing, and he reached out asking if I could do the same for him. Then a third client, a family-owned Thai restaurant in Fremont, struggling with online ordering. Then a fourth, a yoga studio that had been hemorrhaging money on Facebook ads that generated 0 new students. By the end of January, I had 7 clients paying a total of $7,900 a month, and I was working until midnight or 1 in the morning every night after my day job, running on coffee and adrenaline, and the kind of purpose I'd been starving for without realizing it. My apartment had transformed into mission control, desk covered with client folders, whiteboard on the wall, tracking campaigns and metrics, laptop always open to analytics dashboards showing real results for real businesses. I was exhausted in my bones, sleeping maybe 5 hours a night, but I'd never felt more alive. At Cascade, I'd become a ghost, present physically, but checked out in every way that mattered. I did the minimum required to avoid getting fired, attended meetings without contributing beyond what was asked, delivered work that was competent but uninspired. Robert noticed finally during a one-on-one in early February, where he sat across from me with a concerned expression that would have been more convincing if I didn't know it was performed. David, your engagement seems low lately. Is everything okay? I looked at him sitting there in his expensive chair in his corner office, a man who'd told me I added no value while building an entire career on taking credit for other people's work. And I felt nothing, no anger, no resentment, just profound indifference. Everything's fine, Robert, just focused on doing my job. He frowned slightly, unsatisfied with that answer, but unable to articulate why. Well, I need you engaged. We've got some big pitches coming up. I nodded, promised I'd bring my A-game, and walked out of his office knowing with absolute certainty that my time at Cascade Marketing was running out, and that I was the one who'd decide when and how it ended. By March, Local Boost Marketing had 15 clients and was generating $16,400 a month in revenue, more than my salary at Cascade, though most of it went back into the business for tools, contractors, and the occasional freelancer I hired when client work overwhelmed my capacity. I'd brought on a part-time social media manager named Jasmine, a recent grad who understood platforms better than I ever would and worked for reasonable rates because she needed portfolio pieces. The business had developed a reputation in Seattle's small business community as the agency that actually cared whether clients succeeded, that charged fair prices and delivered measurable results. Google reviews started accumulating, 5 stars from Maria, from the bookstore owner, from the Thai restaurant that had seen online orders triple. Every review felt like vindication, proof that the value Robert couldn't see was obvious to people whose livelihoods depended on results rather than corporate politics. The breaking point at Cascade came on a Tuesday morning in mid-March during a company-wide meeting where Robert announced record profits for the previous quarter. He stood at the front of the conference room, wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation about revenue growth and client retention, taking credit for strategies that a dozen different people had developed while he golfed and networked. Our success comes from our commitment to excellence and our ability to deliver value that exceeds client expectations, he said, his voice carrying the rehearsed conviction of someone who'd never actually done the work he was describing. I sat in the back of the room watching him perform, and something crystallized with perfect clarity. I didn't need his approval or his recognition or his money anymore. I had my own clients, my own revenue, my own proof that I could create value. The only thing keeping me at Cascade was fear of the unknown, and that fear had become smaller than my disgust at participating in this charade. I typed out my resignation letter during the meeting while Robert was still talking, my fingers moving across my phone's keyboard with decisive calm. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position at Cascade Marketing. Thank you for the opportunity. No explanation, no drama, just a clean exit from something that no longer served me. I hit send to HR with Robert CC'd, closed my laptop, and walked out of the meeting without saying a word to anyone. The elevator ride down felt like shedding weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my body. By the time I reached the street, rain was falling in that thin Seattle way that's more mist than drops, and I stood there for a moment letting it cover my face, feeling something like freedom start to take root in my chest. My phone buzzed with a call from HR, then a text from Robert saying we need to talk. But I ignored both and started walking toward home, toward the life I'd been building in secret that was now the only life I had. The first month of running Local Boost full-time was chaos, mixed with exhilaration and occasional terror. Without Cascade's salary, I had no safety net. If the business didn't grow, I'd burn through my savings in 3 months and have to either crawl back to corporate marketing or find something else entirely. But the freedom to focus completely on my clients, to work on their success without dividing attention between what mattered and what paid the bills, transformed everything. I could take calls during normal business hours instead of hiding in bathrooms. I could meet clients face-to-face at their locations, instead of squeezing everything into evenings. I could build strategies with the kind of care and attention they deserved, instead of rushing through them at midnight after a full day of meaningless work. The quality of my output improved dramatically, and clients noticed. Referrals increased. By the end of April, I had 23 clients and had raised my prices slightly to manage demand. Word spread faster than I'd anticipated. moving through Seattle's small business networks with the velocity of actually useful information. The owner of a local bakery told the owner of a bike shop, who told the owner of a bookstore, who told the owner of a craft brewery. By May, I had a waiting list and had hired 2 more contractors, a copywriter named Marcus who understood brand voice, and a graphic designer named Alicia who could create social media content that actually stopped people scrolling. We weren't a big agency, weren't trying to be, but we were effective and honest and affordable in ways that made us invaluable to businesses that had been ignored or exploited by the industry I'd just left. One of my clients, the Thai restaurant owner, told me during a check-in call, "You're the first marketing person who's ever treated my business like it matters as much as the big corporate accounts. That's worth more than you charge." I saved that voicemail, played it back whenever imposter syndrome crept in, and whispered that maybe Robert had been right about my value after all. June brought validation I hadn't dared hope for. A local business publication called Seattle Business Monthly reached out asking to interview me for a feature on entrepreneurs disrupting traditional industries. The journalist, a woman named Rachel, had heard about Local Boost from 3 different sources and wanted to know how I was competing with established agencies while charging a fraction of their rates. We met at a coffee shop in Fremont. Ironically, one of my clients, and I told her the whole story. 6 years at Cascade, the denied raise, Robert's dismissal of my value, building Local Boost nights and weekends until it became sustainable enough to jump. She took notes rapidly, her eyes lighting up at the parts that made good copy. "So you're essentially proving your former boss wrong every single day by serving the market he ignored." I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but she was right. Yeah, I guess I am. The article ran in mid-July with the headline, "Local Marketing Entrepreneur Builds Success by Doing What Big Agencies Won't, Actually Caring." It featured quotes from Maria about her coffee shop's transformation, included Local Boost's pricing structure as contrast to industry norms, and positioned me as someone challenging an extractive business model with something more ethical and effective. The piece went live on a Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon my email inbox had exploded. 63 inquiries from small business owners across Seattle and the surrounding areas, all asking variations of the same question. Can you help my business the way you helped Maria's coffee shop? I spent the entire weekend responding to emails, scheduling consultation calls, trying to figure out how to scale without losing the personal touch that made Local Boost different from the agencies I was competing against. By Monday, I'd signed 8 new clients and had to hire another contractor just to keep up with demand. The growth forced me to make decisions I'd been avoiding. I couldn't be a solo operator with a handful of contractors anymore, not if I wanted to serve clients well while maintaining any kind of work-life balance. I rented a small office space in Georgetown, nothing fancy but enough room for a team to work together, and started hiring full-time employees. Jasmine came on permanently to run social media. Marcus joined to handle all copywriting and content strategy, and I brought on a project manager named Kevin, who'd worked at 3 different agencies and was as disgusted by their practices as I was. We weren't a big team, just 5 people including me, but we were aligned on mission in ways that made us far more effective than teams 3 times our size. Every person I hired had either been undervalued at their previous job or had watched agencies prioritize profit over client success until they couldn't stomach it anymore. We were all building something better because we'd all seen how bad it could be. By August, Local Boost Marketing had 47 clients, was generating $68,000 in monthly revenue, and had established a reputation strong enough that businesses were seeking us out rather than me having to hunt for clients. The metrics were undeniable. Our clients saw an average 34% increase in revenue within 6 months. Our retention rate was 96% compared to the industry average of 60%. And our Google reviews averaged 4.9 stars across 63 total reviews. We'd become exactly what I'd set out to build, a marketing agency that treated small businesses like they mattered, that charged fair prices for real results, that operated with transparency instead of obfuscation. The success wasn't just financial, it was philosophical, proof that you could build a profitable business without exploiting the people you served. That alignment between values and outcomes felt more valuable than any salary Robert could have offered. The moment I'd been unconsciously waiting for arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in late September when I received an email from Cascade Marketing's new VP of Business Development, someone I'd never met but who'd apparently heard about Local Boost's growth. "David, we're seeing some overlap between our client base and yours in the small business segment. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership where Cascade could refer overflow clients to Local Boost in exchange for a referral fee. Would you be open to a conversation?" I read that email 3 times, processing the layers of irony embedded in every word. Cascade Marketing, the company that had told me I added no value, wanted to partner with the business I'd built, proving them catastrophically wrong. The agency that charged small businesses $10,000 a month for mediocre service wanted to refer clients they couldn't adequately serve to the company I'd started specifically because agencies like them were failing those businesses. I sat with the email for a full day before responding, not because I was considering the offer, but because I wanted my response to be measured rather than emotional. My response was polite but firm. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm not interested in a partnership with Cascade. Local Boost was built specifically to serve clients differently than traditional agencies, and maintaining that independence is core to our mission. I wish you success with your business." I hit send without second-guessing myself, and the satisfaction was quiet but complete, not because I'd rejected them, but because I'd reached a point where their validation or partnership meant nothing compared to what I'd built on my own terms. Within an hour, I received a response from the VP asking if we could at least have a call to discuss options, and I didn't even reply. Cascade Marketing had become irrelevant to my life, a chapter that was closed and required no epilogue. That indifference, more than anger or resentment, felt like the truest measure of how far I'd come. September rolled into October with momentum that felt almost inevitable. Local Boost crossed 50 clients, then 60, then 70, each one a small business that had been underserved by the marketing industry and was now seeing real results from working with people who actually cared about their success. I'd moved into a better apartment, 2 bedrooms in Wallingford with actual sunlight and a kitchen big enough to cook in, and started paying myself a reasonable salary instead of funneling every dollar back into the business. My student loans were on track to be paid off in 18 months instead of the 10 years I'd been facing. I'd hired a business coach to help me think strategically about growth instead of just reacting to demand. The business had transformed from a desperate escape plan into something sustainable and genuinely impactful, and I was sleeping 6 hours a night instead of 4, which felt like luxury after the grinding exhaustion of the first 6 months. The team had grown to 8 people, all of them committed to Local Boost's mission of serving small businesses with integrity and effectiveness. We'd developed systems and processes that allowed us to deliver consistent quality without me being involved in every single decision, which meant the business could scale beyond my personal capacity. Kevin, the project manager, had proven invaluable at coordinating client work and managing team workflow. Alicia's designs were getting recognized. 2 of our clients had won local awards for their branding, and both credited her work. Marcus's copy was converting browsers into buyers at rates that exceeded industry benchmarks. We weren't just a team anymore. We were a machine built for a specific purpose, and that machine was working exactly as intended. Every monthly team meeting where we reviewed client results felt like validation that we'd built something rare, a business that was both profitable and ethical. The real reckoning came in early November when I received an email from someone I'd never expected to hear from again, Robert Sullivan. The subject line was "Congratulations," and I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. "David, I've been following Local Boost's growth and wanted to reach out personally to congratulate you on what you've built. I'll be honest, when you left Cascade, I thought you were making a huge mistake. I didn't see the potential in what you were trying to do. Clearly, I was wrong. Your success has forced me to reconsider how we operate at Cascade and how we evaluate talent. I hope there are no hard feelings about how things ended between us. Best of luck with your continued growth." The email was brief and formal, probably written and rewritten several times, and it carried the awkward energy of someone trying to acknowledge a mistake without fully apologizing for it. I sat with that email for a long time, feeling a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Part of me wanted to respond with everything I'd been holding back, the anger about being told I added no value, the frustration of watching him take credit for my work, the years of feeling invisible while making him look good. But another part of me, the part that had grown through building Local Boost, recognized that Robert's blindness had been a gift in disguise. If he'd given me that raise, if he'd recognized my value and promoted me, I'd probably still be at Cascade doing work that didn't matter for clients I didn't care about. His failure to see what I was capable of had forced me to see it for myself, to bet on my own value instead of waiting for someone else to validate it. In the end, I replied with just 4 words. Thank you. No hard feelings. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, more like closure, acknowledging that we'd both moved on to different chapters and that the past no longer had power over my present. November brought news through the Seattle business community grapevine that made everything feel full circle. Cascade Marketing had lost 3 major accounts in the past quarter and was restructuring to cut costs. The company that had seemed invincible when I worked there was hemorrhaging clients to smaller, more agile agencies that actually delivered results, and Robert had been demoted from managing director to senior consultant, a lateral move disguised as strategic repositioning. I heard this from a former colleague who'd left Cascade 2 months after I did and had reached out to catch up over coffee. The whole place is falling apart, she said, stirring her latte with weary satisfaction. Robert's lost his edge. He's still doing the same things that worked 10 years ago and wondering why they don't work anymore. Meanwhile, everyone's talking about what you built. Local Boost is the model people wish Cascade would follow. I listened to her talk, feeling neither joy nor vindication, just a quiet recognition that the system I'd escaped from was exactly as unsustainable as I'd suspected. By December, 1 year almost to the day after Robert had denied my raise, Local Boost Marketing had 83 clients and was generating $127,000 in monthly revenue. I'd moved the team to a larger office in Capitol Hill with conference rooms and a proper workspace where people could collaborate without being on top of each other. We'd been featured in 3 more publications, won a local business award for innovative service delivery, and I'd been invited to speak at a small business conference about alternative agency models. The team had grown to 12 people, all of them earning competitive salaries with benefits I'd fought hard to provide. Healthcare, retirement matching, unlimited PTO that people actually used because I encouraged work-life balance instead of grinding people into dust. We'd built not just a successful business, but a good place to work, which felt as important as the profits. The speaking engagement happened on a cold Saturday morning in mid-December at a conference center downtown. I stood in front of 200 small business owners and told them the story I'd been living for the past year, being told I added no value, building something in secret that proved otherwise, leaving security for uncertainty, growing a business by serving people who'd been ignored by my industry. I talked about transparent pricing, measurable results, treating clients like partners instead of ATMs. I showed them the numbers, client retention rates, revenue growth metrics, testimonials from business owners who'd transformed their operations by working with people who actually cared. The presentation was supposed to be 30 minutes, but the Q&A session ran for another 45 because people kept asking variations of the same question. How do we find marketing help that actually works? I gave them Local Boost's website, but I also gave them a framework for evaluating any agency. Demand transparency, require measurable outcomes, refuse to pay for services they couldn't explain, trust businesses that treated them like humans rather than revenue sources. After the presentation, at least 20 business owners approached me wanting to hire Local Boost, and I had to explain that we had a waiting list and were being strategic about growth to maintain quality. But I also gave them referrals to 3 other small agencies I knew operated with similar ethics, not competitors exactly, but colleagues building toward the same vision of what marketing services could be if divorced from corporate extraction models. One woman, maybe in her 60s, who owned a bakery that had been in her family for 40 years, grabbed my hand with both of hers, and said, "Thank you for showing us we don't have to accept being taken advantage of. We always thought that's just how business worked." Her gratitude was almost painful in its sincerity, a reminder of how normalized exploitation had become and how revolutionary simple honesty could feel to people who'd been conditioned to expect betrayal. The year ended with Local Boost's annual revenue hitting $1.1 million, a number that would have seemed impossible when I'd been sitting in Robert's office being told I didn't add enough value to justify a $5,000 raise. I'd paid myself a salary of $95,000 that year, modest compared to what I could have taken, but enough to live comfortably while reinvesting in the business and ensuring my team was well compensated. More importantly, we'd served 83 small businesses that were now thriving in ways they hadn't been before we started working together. Maria's coffee shop had expanded into a second location. The bookstore had survived what should have been a devastating year for independent retailers. The Thai restaurant had paid off debt that had been crushing them for 5 years. These weren't abstract wins. They were real businesses with real families depending on them, and Local Boost had been part of keeping them alive and growing. That impact, more than any revenue number or industry recognition, felt like proof that value wasn't something bosses assigned. It was something you created, and customers validated through their willingness to pay for results. January brought an unexpected opportunity that forced me to think bigger than I'd been allowing myself to. A venture capital firm based in San Francisco reached out, asking if I'd consider taking investment to scale Local Boost nationally. They'd been tracking our growth, loved the model, and wanted to help replicate it in other cities. The offer was $2 million for 20% equity, which would value Local Boost at $10 million and give me resources to expand faster than organic growth would allow. I took the meeting out of curiosity more than genuine interest, flew down to San Francisco on a Tuesday, and spent 2 hours in a conference room with 3 partners who used words like disruption and market opportunity while showing me projections that had Local Boost reaching $50 million in revenue within 5 years. The numbers were seductive, but something about the conversation felt wrong. They kept talking about efficiency and scale, about automating services and maximizing margins, about growth metrics that had nothing to do with whether clients actually succeeded. I flew back to Seattle that evening and spent the entire flight thinking about what taking venture capital would mean. More resources, yes, but also pressure to prioritize growth over quality, to serve investors instead of clients, to become exactly the kind of agency I'd built Local Boost to replace. The VC partners had been impressed by our retention rates and client satisfaction scores, but only because those metrics indicated a profitable business model, not because they cared whether Maria's coffee shop thrived or the bookstore stayed open. By the time the plane landed, I'd made my decision. I'd decline the investment and keep growing at our own pace, profitable and sustainable, serving clients rather than chasing valuations. The next morning, I sent a polite email thanking them for their interest, but explaining that Local Boost's mission required independence they couldn't offer. One of the partners called to try changing my mind, but I held firm. Some things were worth more than money, and control over my business's direction was one of them. February marked 18 months since I'd walked out of Cascade Marketing, and the contrast between my life then and now was almost disorienting. I was making triple what Robert had paid me, working on projects I cared about, leading a team that respected the work we did, serving clients who valued our partnership. I'd paid off my student loans entirely, had actual savings for the first time in my adult life, and was contributing to a retirement account like a responsible adult. But more than the financial stability, what had changed was internal. I no longer felt like I was waiting for someone to notice my value or validate my potential. I knew what I was capable of because I'd built proof that spoke louder than any performance review. That shift from seeking external validation to generating internal certainty had transformed not just my career, but my entire relationship with work and worth. The most unexpected development came in March when I received an email from Cascade Marketing's CEO. Not Robert, but his boss, a woman named Patricia Chen, who I'd met exactly twice during my 6 years at the company. "David, I've been following Local Boost's success and wanted to reach out personally. Cascade is undergoing significant restructuring, to address long-standing issues with our service model and company culture. We're specifically looking at how we serve small and mid-sized businesses, an area where we've clearly failed. I'd like to hire you as a consultant to help us rebuild that division with the principles that have made Local Boost successful. This would be a 6-month engagement, $15,000 per month, with the goal of transforming how Cascade approaches this market segment. I understand there's history here, but I'm hoping we can move past that for a project that could genuinely improve how we serve clients. The email was direct and professional, acknowledging past failures without dwelling on them, and the offer was substantial enough that I couldn't dismiss it out of hand. I sat with the email for 3 days, discussing it with my team and my business coach, trying to separate ego from strategy. Part of me wanted to reject it immediately. Why would I help the company that had undervalued me rebuild the exact thing they'd failed to recognize I could do? But another part saw an opportunity to influence a larger system, to potentially improve how an established agency treated thousands of small businesses instead of just the 100 or so Local Boost could serve directly. I also couldn't ignore the money. $90,000 over 6 months would fund expansion plans I'd been postponing due to cash flow constraints. In the end, I agreed to the engagement with one condition. I'd consult on strategy and systems, but I wouldn't be reporting to Robert in any capacity. Patricia agreed immediately, mentioned that Robert had been moved to a different division entirely, and we signed a contract that felt both validating and surreal. I was going back to Cascade, but this time as the expert they were paying premium rates to learn from, not the employee they'd dismissed as valueless. The consulting engagement with Cascade started in April, and walking back into that building felt like visiting a museum of my former life. Same lobby, same elevators, same conference rooms, but I was different in ways that made the space feel smaller and less intimidating than it had 18 months ago. Patricia assembled a team of 8 people to work with me on rebuilding their small business division, and not one of them was Robert, who'd apparently been reassigned to enterprise accounts, where his particular blend of arrogance and outdated strategies could do less damage. I spent the first 2 weeks just listening, interviewing current clients, reviewing past campaigns, analyzing why Cascade's retention in this segment was 43% compared to Local Boost's 96%. The problems were exactly what I'd suspected: overpricing, under-delivering, treating small businesses like they should be grateful for corporate agency attention rather than customers whose success determined whether the partnership was valuable. Over 6 months, I rebuilt Cascade's approach from the ground up. Transparent pricing models that small businesses could actually afford, service packages designed around their real needs rather than what was profitable to sell, account managers trained to measure success by client outcomes rather than contract renewals, systems for gathering and acting on feedback instead of assuming agencies knew better than the businesses they served. The work was exhausting and often frustrating. Changing institutional culture is harder than building new culture from scratch, but by September, the results were undeniable. Cascade's small business division had doubled its client base, retention had jumped to 78%, and client satisfaction scores had improved by 40 points. Patricia presented the results to the board with me in the room, and afterward she pulled me aside with an offer I should have seen coming. "David, this has been transformative. I'd like you to come on full-time as VP of Small Business Strategy. $250,000 salary plus equity. You'd have full autonomy over this division and budget to build it however you see fit." The offer was generous. More money than I was currently paying myself, stability that consulting and entrepreneurship couldn't guarantee, the satisfaction of reforming a broken system from the inside. But sitting in that conference room, listening to Patricia outline the opportunity, all I could think about was my team at Local Boost, the clients who trusted us, the business I'd built that was mine in ways a corporate title could never be. I'd already proven I could succeed within someone else's system. What I still wanted to prove was that I could build my own system and scale it to the point where it changed the industry rather than just carved out a niche. I thanked Patricia for the offer, told her I needed a week to consider it, and spent that week talking to everyone whose opinion I trusted. My team unanimously said they'd support whatever I decided, but hoped I'd stay. My business coach asked what success looked like in 5 years and whether that vision included working for Cascade. My sister, who'd watched me transform over the past 2 years, said simply, "Don't go backwards. You've worked too hard to get here." I declined Patricia's offer on a Friday afternoon in late September, 18 months to the day after Robert had told me I added no value. My email was gracious and appreciative, thanking her for the opportunity, for trusting me to rebuild the division, for creating space for real change at Cascade. But I explained that Local Boost was more than a business to me. It was proof that alternative models could succeed, that you could serve clients ethically and still be profitable, that value wasn't determined by corporate hierarchy, but by impact you created in the world. "I'm grateful for what I learned at Cascade," I wrote, "both the positive lessons and the difficult ones. But my work now is building something different, and I need to see that through." Patricia responded within an hour. "I understand and respect your decision. What you've built is rare and important. Don't let anyone convince you to give it up for security or status. The world needs more people willing to build differently." Her words felt like the validation I'd been seeking from Cascade for 6 years, and receiving it now, when I no longer needed it, made it somehow more meaningful. By the end of October, Local Boost Marketing had grown to 18 employees, serving 127 clients across Washington state, generating $1.8 million in annual revenue, with projections to hit $2.5 million the following year. We'd opened a second office in Portland, expanded our service offerings based on client requests, and maintained the quality and ethics that had built our reputation in the first place. I'd been invited to speak at 3 conferences, had been featured in a national small business publication, and had other agencies reaching out asking how we'd built what we'd built. But the metric that mattered most to me wasn't revenue or recognition. It was the fact that 94% of our clients had been with us for over a year, that their businesses were thriving, that we'd created jobs and stability and growth for people the industry had treated as second tier. Robert Sullivan had told me I added no value, and in trying to prove him wrong, I'd discovered something more important, that value isn't assigned by bosses or validated by titles. It's created through work that genuinely helps people and demonstrated by their willingness to pay for that help. I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was sitting in that office being dismissed. When someone tells you that you don't add value, they're often revealing their own inability to recognize it, not your failure to create it. Robert couldn't see what I brought to Cascade because he'd never learned to value anything beyond what looked like traditional success: credentials, confidence, corporate polish. He mistook my lack of arrogance for lack of capability, my willingness to learn for inability to lead, my focus on client outcomes for lack of strategic thinking. His blindness wasn't my problem to solve, and it's not yours either. Your job isn't to convince people who can't see your value that you're valuable. Your job is to build something that makes their opinion irrelevant. Read books that teach you how business actually works, not how corporations pretend it works. The Lean Startup showed me that value comes from solving real problems for real people, not from impressive presentations or corporate theater. Build skills in silence, serve clients who appreciate what you do, create proof that speaks louder than any performance review. 1 year ago, my boss denied my raise and told me I added no value. Today, his company pays me consultant rates to teach them what I built, while he watches from a different division. That's not revenge through destruction. It's vindication through construction. That's what happens when you stop seeking validation from people who can't see you clearly and start building proof they can't ignore. Now go create value they'll regret missing. I'll be here, still building, still growing, still refusing to let anyone else define what I'm worth.